Howdy, folks. Welcome to the first ever episode of the podcast Iron. On this podcast, I interview members of the cast iron art community in order to inspire, educate, and spread ideas about iron casting and cast iron art. Today, I'm excited to share with you an interview with my dear friend, Jim Wade. For those of you who don't know him, Jim Wade is a prolific artist and a major player in the cast iron art community. So without further ado, let's get into the interview. Jim Wade.
This is me.
Fancy seeing you around these parts.
What's happening?
So I was just gonna start off with, I clicked the wrong button. Start off by clicking the wrong button. I'm just gonna start off with, well, Jim Wade, who the hell are you anyway?
Well, I am Jim Wade, and I guess in professional circles, some people call me James. My given name. This is Bosun. He's in the corner of the frame here, if you can see him.
What kind of a dog is Bosun?
He is a treeing walker coonhound.
Oh.
He's a good boy.
He's a good boy. He's like, Dad, why are you talking so much to yourself?
He's like, dude, what's up with this?
He is. Usually I feel like when my dog would be around and I'd film myself, my dog would be like, or on the phone, he would get weirded out. So
I'm Jim Wade, and I am a sculptor, and I have been told by people that apparently I have some iron casting skills and have been a bit influential here and there, but it was never my intent to become that. I'm a sculptor I feel very strongly that material follows concept rather than trying to shove an idea into a set material. But I'm a sculptor, mold maker, do drawing. Those are my primary disciplines, I guess you would say. And then otherwise, I pay the bills sometimes with selling things as a sculptor, but most of the time at the moment, I am a woodworker and I do custom furniture, like heirloom grade furniture, but also a lot of bar tops and furniture for distilleries and breweries, and architectural details for breweries and distilleries and restaurants. That's my new bread and butter. I was one of those academics for about 24 years, I think it was, and decided that it was time for a change. And 4 years ago, I decided that I was going to go take care of myself. So,
hey, just like a little insertion, I remember after that happened, Jimbo and Leanne. So for those of you who are listening, we're talking about Jimbo Nicorsi and Leanne Mitchell. And Jimbo was my professor of sculpture at the University of Georgia. And tell me exactly your relation with Jimbo.
So I went to graduate school at University of Georgia, and Jimbo wasn't my major professor. There were 5 or 6 sculpture faculty at the time, but he was Rocky Sapp was my major professor, but Jimbo was one of my big influences.
He was around.
Yeah, we spent an awful lot of time together. Not just in the studio.
I think we'll circle back to that, but I just wanted to give you this little anecdote, and I may have already told you this actually in person, but it was right after you had switched kind of paths, I guess, and you had left the academic world, and then in that May in Memphis at the Metal Museum at Fire, Jimbo and Leanne like stopped by, and then I was talking to them, but they had seen you. And Leanne said to Jimbo, I've never seen him look this happy. He looks fantastic.
I've gotten that a lot since I changed career paths as far as gotten out of academics anyway. I never really saw myself as an academic, even though I did it for so long and had some really, really amazing students over the years. But I've heard from many people that have said, I've never seen you smile before, or I can't believe you're smiling, or you look so much better. So,
I mean, that has got to be like a sign that you did something right, no matter what your day to day is like. The
yeah,
overarching, it might have been
yeah.
like
It's
you did it.
it's refreshing and
I'm so glad to hear that. I'm
kind
so
of
glad.
nice. So,
Well, anyways, then now that we know a little bit about you right now, let's kind of rewind a little bit and talk
okay.
about kind of like we're going to just do a little brief, maybe childhood exploration of where
Mm.
maybe art budded or maybe some pre dispositions to certain maybe different. I'm throwing generalizations out here and seeing if
Gonna jump
anything
in the
sticks.
gonna jump in the Wayback Machine,
Yeah.
and I have been surrounded by creativity all my life. I was born in this little town in Indiana called Columbus, and people that have studied a lot of architecture will know Columbus as it's nicknamed the architectural capital of the world.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's actually a company town where Cummins Engine Company, diesel engine company, is located, and they pump a lot of money into the community and the schools and try to have the best of everything that they can for the city. And
Mm-hmm.
with that, and a local banker, the Irwin family, they started building some of the most amazing architecture. I believe, I want to say one of the Irwins went to school with one of the Saarinens architects. And they started this basically like this competition. Anytime a new public building was being built or a church or something like that, that they would do competition for the best of the best architects to get the commission for that. So um, when I went to the library, it was designed by I.M. Pei. And when I went to
Mm-hmm.
Boy Scouts, it was in a church divided, but designed by, I think it was Eros Saarinen. And then Aiel Saarinen, I'm probably pronouncing their names terribly, but
It's okay because
had,
I'm not an architecture buff. So I'm
yeah,
like, I'm reacting to these names and just like, look, I'll
yeah,
look them up later. You
yeah,
know what I mean? And I'm sorry, but I also am like, I'm getting from your contacts like the weight of what
yeah,
buildings like that being just immersed in that type of
yeah,
architecture as a child.
yeah. And so then on top of that, with those buildings came art. And so
Good.
there
Good.
was a Henry Moore that was like my childhood playground. I could never climb it. I couldn't, it just was unclimbable. If I could have climbed it, I would have climbed it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it was right, it was just this Henry Moore just in front of the library in this tiny little town in Indiana, and so I was surrounded by that. Like our elementary schools had sculpture on the playground and
Yeah.
things like that. And then my mother had an art background, and she was very um, she really pushed creativity, and was always trying to do stuff with us. And my dad is an engineer, but he was always kind of pushing creative problem solving, that kind of thing. But from the start, my visual field was just incredible architecture and sculpture in public places that just seemed normal to me. It's like, doesn't everybody have this?
Yeah.
So
So then, as you were like operating through the world as a child, were you making things? Were you like the star in the art class? Were you building things in the shop? You mentioned Boy Scouts. Did you
yeah, I
do?
I was very hands-on. Like, love building things, but I was terrible at it. I was absolutely terrible at making things.
Was that your opinion back then, or is it now looking back?
Well, it was, like I couldn't drive a nail straight, and I couldn't cut anything straight, and
Can you now?
sometimes.
Yeah. So
um,
personal growth.
but it I don't know. I think maybe the things I couldn't do, and it pushed me to try to be better at those things. But I
Mm-hmm.
was also rather antisocial, and had very, very awkward social skills. And I spent an awful lot of time in the basement building
Mm-hmm.
model airplanes and things like that, just because I didn't have a huge circle of friends. And
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
but I was always dabbling in something creative.
Uh-huh.
Um, just
Yeah.
kind of, it was always around me.
So then, like moving forward, when we talk about maybe adolescence or high
Mhm.
school, or if you want to
So
jump to college, like, when did you, was there, yeah, just like moving
yeah.
forward, where does
So
the thread of this story go?
well, it's a curious story. I moved to Lexington, Kentucky when I was 14
Mm-hmm.
permanently. My family had been in Lexington since the 1700s on the same piece of property. And so we moved when I was 14 to Lexington and built a house on the family farm.
Okay.
So I'd always spent my impressionable years, or my impressionable time, at the farm.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Spring breaks and Christmas break and
Yeah.
Thanksgiving. And I was one of those kids that was lucky enough to have your grandparents take you in for a month during the summer, and you
Yeah.
just ran wild, and come in at dark if you're hungry, and stuff like that. And so the farm was always a huge influence for me. And my other set of grandparents also lived in Lexington, and
Mm-hmm.
my grandfather was the state geologist, and he was always showing me maps, and he would hand draw contour maps and things like that. And so I was just I had these little things creeping in from different directions of um,
Influence.
just kind of visual influence, whether it
Mhm.
was straight up artistic influence, or if it was just things that would become kind of undercurrents in my portfolio over the years. Um, I ended up going to the University of Kentucky for undergrad. I
Mm-hmm.
started in engineering. I was
Okay.
told that I was supposed to be an engineer.
Naturally. I mean,
I
your
wasn't
father.
asked. I wasn't asked. I was told. Um,
I mean, you said your father was an engineer?
yes,
Yeah.
yes,
So,
and
I
all of
mean,
his brothers, and
so
one of his
duh.
sisters, and
Yeah.
both of his parents. And
Wow.
so I was expected to be an engineer, and I tried. It just wasn't really what I wanted to do, and I didn't want to sit in a cubicle punching at a computer. And I did an internship at IBM and worked for some little firms around town, and it just wasn't what I wanted to do. And a friend of mine suggested I take some art classes as a sanity break from
Yeah.
all that. And so I took a drawing class, and then that drawing class led to another drawing class the next semester, and then that led to a painting class the next semester. And I realized that that was much more in keeping with how my brain worked and what I wanted to do at the time.
Yeah.
Not really thinking about long term.
I know.
It
But
was
you
just
can't, like, I'm in the same, like, when I was in undergrad, I didn't think about, you know,
sure.
I'm lucky I got into it before I had a slap of reality. Yeah.
Well, adulting is hard.
Yeah.
So if we always just follow the path that feels right, then I think we're good. And that's
Yeah.
what I did. That path felt right, and it still feels right.
Yeah.
It's been a different path for many different times, but it's still the same basic path. So
Yeah.
um,
So the drawing classes turned into.
Yeah. So when I changed majors, I was required to take, like any art school, you have to take a sampling of different classes, and so I
Uh-huh.
took
Uh-huh.
took a 3D class with Gary Bibbs, and
Uh-huh.
Gary is mostly a fabricator and a printmaker, and but he had just started teaching. I think it was maybe his second semester or third semester teaching, and
Uh-huh.
we hit it off pretty well, and he was very encouraging about what I was doing, and but it was 3D design class, all over the place,
Yeah.
uh, and I was kind of late coming into the game because I changed majors, and it so uh, but when I took his class, I realized I love drawing, but it's not all of what I want to do.
Uh-huh.
I thought I loved painting, but I was a horrible, horrible, horrible painter. I was absolutely horrible painter.
Okay.
And my parents, I convinced them I was going to go into graphic design, which that wasn't happening.
Yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
so
But
I ended up in sculpture, and uh, that's where I stayed with the drawing on the side, and
mm-hmm. So what
here I am.
materials were you using at the time at this point, focusing in sculpture?
I was doing mostly woodworking and found materials, some more assemblage, using a lot of materials from the farm,
Mm-hmm.
playing with uh, different kinds of wood, found objects. I was doing some experiments with light, and I'd found some glass plates, geology slides, that these large format geology slide plates that for that you project for
Yeah. Yeah.
topo maps and stuff, and
Mm-hmm.
played with that stuff for a while. And when I was introduced to metal arts, UK has always been known as the place for metal arts, and uh, Jack Gron was the head of sculpture at the time,
Mm-hmm.
and he and Gary Bibbs were they were doing mostly large scale public sculpture, steel fabrication, stainless steel fabrication, and that's what UK was known for.
So
And
were they teaching that and also producing it themselves on?
yes, yeah,
Awesome. Okay.
and we did have foundry, a foundry class, but it was usually more of cast objects became elements within other works, which I
Mm-hmm.
love that idea, and it's something that I've always encouraged other people to think about, that
Mm-hmm.
that blending of materials and how that just says so much more sometimes. And so I'm not sure why I gravitated towards foundry at the time. I think the tactility of it. We didn't have resin sand.
Okay.
We didn't have ceramic shell. All we had was traditional Ludo
Oh
investment,
yeah.
and so we were casting art bronze. We'd go to the scrapyard and get a bunch of parts out of like big electrical conductor boxes and melt them down,
Uh-huh.
uh, and so that's how I got started in foundry. But I always kept those ideas as a not as a standalone object, but as an object, an element within that greater vocabulary.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It really, strangely, in undergrad, it wasn't necessarily something that I focused towards. Like I said, I was much more into kind of mixed media and assemblage, and um, it wasn't until I got to grad school that um, working with Jim Corsi and Jim Connect, who was
Mm-hmm.
Jim Connect was the primary foundry professor, and
Okay.
the and they did all they did all Ludo molds,
Mm-hmm.
and I just I think the freedom of grad school, I started kind of testing my limits of the foundry, and um, in a way I gravitated a little bit to the things I never did in undergrad.
Uh-huh. Okay. Yeah.
I did a lot more steel fabrication
Mm-hmm.
my first year of grad school. Did a lot more foundry my first year of grad school. I taught myself green sand casting. We had a big bin of green sand, and I taught myself green sand casting.
Uh-huh.
Jim Connect just said, "Yeah, if you want to try it, use
Go
it."
ahead.
And so I dabbled, and can't say that I was that great at it, but I dabbled, and
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
but it wasn't until at the time UGA was a 2-year program,
Oh, okay.
graduate school,
Okay.
and we were on quarters. So basically, we had to take the same amount of time and classes that you would in a 3-year program and compress it into 2 years. Basically, we just went year round,
That sounds
four quarters, and
that that kind of sounds terrible.
it was hard. It was
Yeah.
stressful. It was tough. It really it kind of, but it pulled out the good in most of us creatively, as far
Yeah.
as kind of so many late nights in the shop. And at the
Yeah.
time we had like I said earlier, we had I think 5 faculty in sculpture,
Wow.
and then there were, depending on the year, there were 11 or 12 of us
Oh.
MFAs just in sculpture,
Wow.
and only one scholarship. So
Oh, yeah.
it was very competitive.
Wow.
Everybody was top notch. It was um, and like a lot of programs, you get to this really healthy, not necessarily one-upmanship, but they did something amazing and it pushes you to do something amazing.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
just kind of compounds, and but it wasn't necessarily competitive in a way that
Like it sounds like it
it
wasn't
wasn't a cut.
cutthroat.
Yeah, it wasn't
It
a cutthroat
was
situation.
more
There was,
like what's that saying? Rising tides raise all ships.
yeah,
Sort
yeah,
of.
something like that.
I may be
Yeah, so
projecting. That sounds
it'd
good.
be 4 a.m. in the studio, and everybody's helping each other make things and giving each other critiques in the middle of the night, and just constant making and showing and talking. And those of you that don't know, University of Georgia is in Athens. Athens, Georgia is one of the hubs of music in the United States.
Mhm.
And I think in 2 years, I maybe saw 6 shows. So we were in the studio a lot.
Yeah, I had a similar, I mean, I did a lot. I have to remember this interview isn't about me, but I think that you're triggering a lot of like, I want to like, yeah, I just will say, uh, I didn't see a lot of Athens, Georgia either in 3 years that I lived there. And then I left. And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I didn't have a 2-year program or anything, but the amount of focus that I had in 3 years, I can't even imagine doing that same amount of work
Yes.
in two. It's
It was
boggling.
intense. It was very intense.
But pressure creates a diamond.
Something. Yeah.
I mean, it may be
I
like
don't
an
know. I went.
industrial grade diamond on a diamond tip file, but it's still a
Yeah, there were plenty of meltdowns.
diamond. Yeah.
There was one quarter where I think I went. So quarter is 3 months, and I think I went 2.5 months without making anything in sculpture. I went to drawing and just did things in drawing, and I was supposed to be working on my thesis at that point, and so my thesis was in the spring, I don't even think I started my thesis until well after Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
A complete whole new body of work, and so it was very intense. It was very intimidating.
Mm-hmm.
There was lots of support,
Mm-hmm.
but it was demanding. The professors, like I said, Rocky Sapp, Jim Corsi, Jim Connect, Horace Farlow, Larry Millard. It was, they had a level that was, it was Ivy League.
Mm-hmm.
They expected. I was literally told by one of them that I expect a stroke of genius.
Mm-hmm.
So it was very humbling.
Mm-hmm.
But it was exactly what I needed. It was what I needed at the time. It was the only grad school I was even accepted to. It was like, I applied to 7 or 8 grad schools, and it was the only place that would take me. And turned out it was exactly what I needed at the time. So
That's good to hear.
yeah.
And so I feel like I just wanted to clarify. So the introduction to casting of iron, was that at UGA or was that before?
It was at UGA,
Okay.
and it was my final quarter. I had already I had already finished my thesis. I had seen iron casting the previous fall at Florida State with Charles Hook, and
Mm-hmm.
we had an exchange show where a lot of Florida State students sent work for an exhibition at Georgia, and then students from Georgia sent a bunch of work for exhibition at Florida State. And when we had the opening, Hook had an iron pour out on the lawn of 621. If anybody's familiar with Tallahassee and 621 Gallery, and I'd never seen it before.
Would
I was
you
like, what is this?
would you mind if I asked you to if would you mind terribly if I asked you to date yourself? Like, could you tell me what year it was?
That was 1995.
All right.
And that was the first time I'd seen iron casting in person. It was a year or two after the first SLOS conference.
Okay.
And I didn't go. Several people I went to school with had gone, but I didn't get to go. Kentucky didn't have iron. Kentucky didn't get iron until after I left UK. Georgia didn't have iron until literally the last week I was there. And so in 1996, and Charles Hook built the primary guts of the shell for the furnace. And
Yeah.
he and a group of students brought that up from Florida State.
Yeah. I think Leanne has, I might ask Leanne if I can put a photo on the like YouTube of this so people could see it, because I love that photo.
Yeah, I have some photos somewhere. I haven't seen them in a long time, but so that week we I think it was the last week of school, or it was the last month of school, definitely. So we finished the furnace. A couple of us built all the tools, the ladles, the tap spikes, the skimmers, everything. And we would do it not knowing what we were doing, and then we'd take them out, and Hook would be like, that's not gonna work. We'd go back in, take them apart, redo them. And Hook was a man of very, very few words. He'd just kind of grumble and he would go away. Beautiful, wonderful man. And so that was our introduction to actually using a cupola.
Yeah.
And it was our introduction to sand molds. Actually, the summer before I left for Georgia for grad school, UK started using resin bonded sand for an emeritus professor for commission, and that was the first time I'd seen it.
Okay.
I'd never mixed it myself or anything. I just knew it. I knew it was there at that point in time. And So it was that last week of grad school or last month of grad school in 96 that I really finally got my hands into it.
So
And
your senior thesis was your show over and everything like that?
yes,
Okay.
it
So
was.
you're in a little bit of a relaxed, like all you knew you were getting out of there alive.
Yeah, I was just in a daze and in a fog, and it was, it'd been just a crazy 2 years. And
Yeah.
the only thing I remember from that pour, I remember making the tools and Hook saying that it's not going to work and remaking them.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And I remember helping line the furnace, and I remember my mold disintegrating when I tried to pick it up off the
Oh no.
studio floor.
Oh my gosh.
And
So so did they
then
bring the chemistry and the sand and like a cement mixer or something, or what were you mixing the sand with?
I honestly don't remember. It was
And
it
that's
was either
fine.
a cement mixer or bucket mixes with a drill. It was
So
one
do
or
you
the
think when you picked up your mold, was it maybe not like not right ratio or
it was a furan chemical, which
uh-huh.
are they're at the time that chemistry was notoriously brittle. Um, it's a little
Okay.
better now. I
Okay.
think it's a lot better now, but it was pretty
Okay.
brittle. And part of it too, I think, was like it got knocked by someone in the shop when it
Uh-huh.
was carrying, and so it
Fully.
never really had a chance. So
Mm-hmm.
I just remember that people were like, throw it away, and I was like, nope. And
Yeah.
I
Good.
got that thing all back together. I didn't. There wasn't any core paste, so I'm just like trying to match up fracture lines and
Oh
just
my
make it
gosh.
all work so it won't leak. And
Like there wasn't any
did it.
left or there wasn't any.
There wasn't any left, and
Okay.
so
Oh dang.
because as usual, I was like the last one ready because what I am notorious for is I help everybody else, and then all
Yeah.
of a sudden, oh, I forgot I was supposed to do something.
Yeah. Selfless. Yeah.
And
And
so I scrambled and I strapped it to a board and
like metal banding to a
just
board.
banded it to a board and like put wedges in it so it held all together,
Yeah.
and it worked.
It
I
was.
pulled it off, so I still have it. My
What
my
was it
first
of?
my first ever iron casting. It was it still exists. It's
Yeah.
a uh, hand hewn tobacco stick, which is something used in the harvest of tobacco. Um,
Okay.
so it was probably made in, I don't know, the 1800s, and
Huh. Uh-huh.
it was something that I had several of them as elements in my thesis show,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
this one was an extra one I had, and it was just kind of one of those things where it was like, I think Jimbo was like, "You're doing all this work, you better get something out of it." So it
Yeah.
was there, so I, you know,
Yeah.
said, "Okay, let's find this." And of course, it was like ultra complicated and tons of part lines, and even though it was just a stick,
I yeah.
So
I
yeah,
helped somebody cast antlers once.
yeah,
And for the amount of time I spent helping them cast the antlers, I should have gotten them. Like
yeah,
for the amount of time I helped them with the multi-part mold, and because they were like, I have no idea what I'm doing at just like a 6 mile conference.
yeah.
And someone was like, I think you should pick something else. And I was like, no, I can help. I got this. And I mean, whatever. It is what but I loved that experience. And I just told you the story. That was like
Yeah.
probably 10 years ago. Um, oh, right. All right. So I feel like we're up to the introduction to iron.
Right. So
And so
I
that,
saw it first with Hook at Florida State,
yeah,
and then we
he
had that
brought it.
pour with at UGA, and immediately after that, I left.
Yeah.
I got a teaching job in Oklahoma at a small state university, Southeastern, and immediately packed the truck like the day after.
Yeah,
Actually, not the day after, but it
I
seemed
know.
like it.
Yeah, I know what
It
you
seemed like
mean.
it, and
Like
hit
when
the
rent
road.
was up, when that month's
Yeah,
rent was up,
yeah,
that's you left.
yeah. So I got to Oklahoma, and I built a small crucible furnace for aluminum and bronze, and
Okay. Yeah.
but uh, didn't know anything about building a cupola or cupolet, and um, so what I would do though is I would go to conferences, and
Yeah.
um, Jeremy Colbert, who is a notorious iron caster, was my
Yeah.
first student.
Oh,
And
wow. I'm going to learn so much. I'm so excited right now.
yeah.
I got so excited because
So
I
Jeremy,
I have like a list. So he's like
yeah,
he's already on the list
yeah.
of
So
people like
Jeremy was he was my first student in Oklahoma. And I remember the first day of class, I was so nervous, and he was the first one through the door, and I just thought, okay. Um, so I took Jeremy. I knew he had some potential, and
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
I think it was probably my second year there. I took Jeremy to a conference at Kentucky. It was a Mid America Sculpture Conference, and there was an iron pour, um, and then so that was his first introduction to
Uh-huh.
pouring
And
iron.
who was who was running that show? Who's
I think,
Furnace? Who showed up?
well, in the meantime, Kentucky had gotten an iron program started with help from uh, I think Tom Geip it was, and so there were some students from Tom's program, Edwardsville, uh, that
Yeah.
I think you have an association with.
Uh
Southern
I mean, I
Illinois,
can
Edwardsville.
guess Andrew Marsh.
So no, I mean you have an association
Oh,
with
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Edwardsville. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So for
So
the listeners, my day job, I
yeah,
work at Southern Illinois University, in their university museum. So
yeah,
I don't have a teaching job. I have a staff position, which is
yeah,
wonderful and rewarding and helps me pay the bills for
yeah.
sure.
Yeah, so we got to this conference, and uh, so UK had a pour of their own, and then there was a performance pour by Andrew Marsh and Matt Toole, and
Yeah.
they were both grad students at Edwardsville at the time.
Yeah.
And Andrew, he and I went to art school together, but we had been friends since we were 18, before, when we were freshmen in college,
Oh,
way
wow.
before art school.
Oh,
Like three
wow.
years before either of us thought about art school,
Yeah.
we were
Huh.
friends, and so anyway, Andrew took off on a music career for a while and then came back to school. And so his grad school experience was a few years after mine.
Yeah. Maybe
Because
his interview will be a few months after yours.
yeah, yeah. So
But yeah, so he was
yeah,
there.
so
Matt Toole was there with Tom
Matt
Guy.
and Andrew and Tom was there, and honestly, I don't know. At the time, I didn't know that many people
And that's fine.
in
That's
that
fine.
community. So I think Hook may have been there, because Hook
Uh-huh.
went to University of Kentucky
Yeah.
for undergraduate degree.
Yeah.
And
I can relate to that because I will tell you now when I go to Sloss versus the first time I went to Sloss. The first time I went to Sloss, I only knew people from UGA
yeah,
and and that's it.
yeah,
And then as the years go by, it seems to get smaller and smaller, but it's really just this fit family. I don't know.
and
This community is like a family and it grows. And so
the tree gets bigger and bigger.
yeah. So you were there. They did a performance. Which had you done performance or seen that
I had never
use of
seen I had never
cast
seen
iron?
performance around there
Okay.
before, and I had no idea what to think. And but Jeremy fell in love with the idea of iron, and when he graduated, he ended up going to grad school at Florida State and studying with Hook. So we so when he got there, there's another student, my last rock star in Oklahoma. Jeremy was my first rock star in Oklahoma, and I had several rock stars in Oklahoma, but my last rock star in Oklahoma was Brad Allen, who is the head of sculpture at the University of Montana. And,
okay.
He went to grad school with Toby Flores and Jason Kimes. And so when Brad was in school, we would drive 18 hours from Oklahoma to go to Tallahassee to pour iron with Jeremy and Hook for a weekend, and then drive back. And we do it every semester.
Oh, wow.
And
would you bring molds made?
We started making molds there.
Okay.
And then I got chemicals donated to the school where I was teaching. And so I think the last 2 pours we went to, we got to bring our own molds. And that was when I really got to work with Charles and got the hands-on experience. I had a lot of it when I was at Georgia with Jimbo in the first pour there. Yeah. But this finally I got to have like multiple experiences with it. And and so it was very, it was iron. It was, wow, what is this?
And was that the beginning? Or I'll have to interview some other people that maybe had it earlier, or I don't know. I have to.
Iron had been at Florida State for quite a while. Hook.
Like, we talking 10 years, or we talking like 25? Probably not.
Oh, that I don't know.
And that's fine. It's probably out there somewhere. Somebody knows. I just got to get a handle on this timeline if I'm going to be doing this.
It came to Hook through, he went to grad school in St. Louis at Wash U. He and Jack Braun and a lot of people that we kind of know studied with Jim Sterrett there. And I think Sterrett had a connection to some people that were dabbling in iron and trying to figure it out. And the Julia Schmidt that was kind of the academic godfather of iron. I think Sterrett had some connection with Julia Schmidt, and that's kind of how I guess Hook kind of got into it. And can't say for sure, can't quote.
We'll figure it out. Somebody knows. Well, so you just kept learning, improving, and using iron components.
Right. So I was making elements for pieces, and then I was doing some wall piece reliefs, and which everybody's like, how do you hang that on the wall? Heavy.
I don't know. Put it into the studs with a cleat.
Yeah, I use French cleats, and worked just fine. But I moved back to Lexington in 2002, and that was right after Brad Allen had graduated, and he ended up at Carbondale, like I said, with Toby Flores and Jason Kimes, and so that was only like 5 hours down the road. Instead of 18. And so they would give me gas money to come do a grad crit with them, and then we would pour iron. And so they built several furnaces there, and they actually had a continuous that they found in the junk pile that was one of Julia Schmidt's first continuous furnaces. And so we welded it all back together and patched it up, and it was called Patches because it had so many patches on it. And so we ran that, and we outran with this little, it was like a little 10 or 12 inch continuous, and we outpoured like an 18-inch coupolette. It wasn't the hottest metal in the world, but
oh yeah,
but it was,
it never is. I'm sorry, excuse me.
yeah.
God bless me.
But that was my real serious introduction to being a key player and
Mhm.
the activities of iron. I wasn't just a bystander. I wasn't just
Mhm.
somebody coming in for a mold workshop and
Yeah.
breaking iron and maybe being on a ladle crew.
Yeah.
That was my first time as the four of us, Jason, Brad, Toby, and me were like, we were the furnace crew and
Running
the
the
ladle
show.
crew.
Yeah.
And about that same time, University of Kentucky asked me to start teaching part-time. And Jerry Massey, who
Yeah.
is well known because of Sculpture Trails.
Yeah.
He had just graduated grad school from Kentucky, and he and I were teaching together.
Yeah.
And Jack Grahn had left Kentucky.
Mm-hmm.
So the iron program was me and Jerry. And it was just like this storm of we just got thrown into the pot. We had to learn. It was like it was literally trial by fire.
Yeah.
And in a way, I took these little tidbits I'd gotten from Hook, and I took what I had gleaned from Toby and Jason, because I think Toby had come from an iron program. Jason had come from working with Skip Van Houten. Brad was a newbie at it. I was, for all intents and purposes, a newbie at it. And Jerry Massey and I we dove in, and we basically reinvented the wheel. And
yeah,
turned it into a 4-wheel drive and just went for it. And
that's when you put the reps in. That's when you got it. Yeah.
Right. That's right. So we'd be at the university at 3 or 4 in the morning, because the students, they really didn't know what was happening. And Jerry's wife, Lisa, she'd come from work, and she'd be in like office clothes, like a pencil skirt and a nice shirt and high heels. We always called them her furnace ramming shoes, because she'd be in high heels making refractory balls and setting them up on the furnace while Jerry and I rammed the furnace. And but I was never formally trained. It was always make it up as you go.
Yeah.
And, I learned by failing many times. It was a long road, but I learned a lot. Just for the fact that like I said, I failed so many times. You had to problem solve. You had to design on the fly, and
try something new.
I'd never even been told that there were these different books out there with formulas and design ideas and these kind of things. We just were like, does it seem like it's not getting enough air? All right, let's cut these tweers open. Let's get a bigger blower. Let's like change this, change that. And we made it work. We would just have marathon pours. And
would you be changing things on the fly, like while like while it's like on blast?
Yes.
Dang.
Yeah, it was kind of crazy. It's like you start learning about, my slaggers are too small because they all froze up. And same with the tap hole, and you got to open that up. And it was nothing to open the tap hole up and then go get a oxyacetylene torch and cut the hole bigger and chisel out the refractory and hope for the best. And I don't recommend doing that. It was not the perfect thing in the world.
We'll have you on the record. Don't recommend.
We lost the bottom once, and so you gotta be careful if you're doing that. I don't recommend it.
Okay. I'll try and avoid it. That's okay. So I don't know. So blah blah blah. at this point, I'm basically interested in kind of talking about why do you continue iron casting and using iron as a material in your artwork?
I fell in love with the process, and I
Yeah.
think most people that cast iron and continue to cast iron fall in love with the process. A lot of people get burned out with it and say, that was
Yeah.
fun while it lasted, and I'm done, and I'm going to move on to this other thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I was really lucky that I got invited by Jerry Massey and Pam Brown to teach at the Colbertdale workshops in England, which were kind of notorious and kind of unknown. They were very well known, but unknown. It kind of depended who you talk to, but they were started by Jack Grahn and Rick Batten. And so for quite a few years, I got to go over for 6-8 weeks every summer and teach these workshops to students.
Uh-huh.
And these students were people like the head of sculpture of the Royal Academy and things like that.
Okay.
And the kind of camaraderie of trading ideas was very much like that of grad school, where it's like, I don't know anything about this, but he does, so we're going to talk. And I don't know anything about that, but she does, and so we're going to talk. And you start feeding off each other. And
yeah,
we got so good at it in England that it became very boring. And you know that you have a good pour if you're bored. That's the best kind of pour to have. And
yeah,
we brought that back with us to the UK and to sculpture trails with that attitude. And but that really instilled in me a discipline, and the way that iron was no different than bronze casting or aluminum casting.
yeah,
There's no reason that it shouldn't turn out every single time.
yeah. Or
It's just, you might be using a different mold material. If it's ceramic shell, it's all the same, but if it's resin sand, most people use resin sand or green sand for iron, and you don't see it as often. It's a little picky with bronze, but you'll see it with aluminum.
yeah, and that's kind of what that concept that you just touched upon, where you became good and you were able to expect outcomes. I think that I usually will relate that to what we would see in kind of like ceramics. If you want there to be an element of unknown in an atmospheric kiln or but eventually even those raku firings, they do it in a controlled way with certain intentions. And I can see that at this point in your story and your journey, that's where you got with iron.
Yeah, it was very much like that, where, like you said, especially with raku, where it's like, what the glaze can do, but you don't know exactly what you're going to get.
Yeah.
And so I would start to push the limits of the mold making and the metal, but in that controlled way, still within the mold. And a lot of that came through the pattern making process. And I never did like performance iron, that kind of thing, as far as like pushing the predictably unpredictable or the unpredictably predictable. But I would try to push the material and myself to, and it just became a really interesting challenge. And I think one of the reasons that it really became part of my vocabulary was I had to teach it.
Yeah.
And like Jimbo said, that first pour, you did all this work, you better get something out of it for yourself. And
amen. Like,
and that was always in the back of my brain, and it would feed my energy to make sure that the furnace ran well and that the metal was just right, and the molds were just right, and the crews were just right. And, but I realized that iron, the material itself, it says a lot, with like its earthiness. I mean, it's from the earth, it's of the earth, it's also of space. Iron comes to earth from the galaxies. They're from, from the universe. Wayne Potratz has really good stories about that, just the whole element side of things. But to me, there's a pragmatism to iron. There's a utility to iron, and I mean, I think we all understand that from engine blocks and frying pans.
Yep.
And I think people that have seen my work will understand that I have a highly influenced kind of theme of kind of industrial agriculture.
Yeah.
So the material really lent itself to a complementary voice to the subject that I was using.
Yeah.
I didn't have to force an idea into things. Like I was making the same work, but I was casting in at bronze, but it just seemed too precious.
Yeah.
It just didn't feel right.
I can feel that. I can relate to that.
If I'm casting a landscape, it's like, it sounds funny that I say I'm a landscape sculptor, but if I'm casting a landscape,
yeah,
it's so different if it's bronze versus if it's iron. It has a totally different context, and the content becomes richer with the iron. And so I really found that way of letting the material complement the work I was already producing, and it just fed into, it just kept, again, branching and branching and branching, and the different paths I would follow. And then also it became, these days, the works I've been making actually follow the history of the object. So my recent drawings have been taking a bathtub and 3D scanning it, and then manipulating it in the computer, and then crushing the bathtub.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And casting these iron back plates.
Okay, because I've seen this work. When I think you had I know you had a solo show at the Metal Museum.
Yeah.
When you were the I don't know what do they call it? Artist resident.
I was the guest artist.
The guest artist, yeah. At Fire.
The Fire conference, yeah.
Yeah.
And so I would powder coat them to look like enamel on a bathtub, and use a laser to burn through the enamel to show the iron, and then let it rust like the drain on the bathtub. The old drain on the bathtub. And
I've seen these works, but I didn't know that you crushed the specific bathtub that you photographed and then recast it. Oh my.
There's another piece that is, I was doing this series, it still am, where I take molds off of molds off of molds off of molds. And
I feel like I've seen some of these.
So the mold becomes the pattern, and on and on. And one in particular was, I took molds off of a radiator that was in my bedroom at my grandmother's house. And then I crushed that radiator, and it became the material for the casting. So there's like that presence and absence and a history to it that's
and sentimentality.
Yeah, I don't want it to be a nostalgic kind of sentimentality.
Okay.
It's kind of hard not to. If you say it's sentimental, it almost automatically becomes nostalgic. But I would like to say it's more poetic. I would like to say that it has a, in that sense, that sentiment of the poetic side of things, that celebrating the history of the material as the new object from itself. So those are the ideas I've been pushing lately is how does that context of the material itself affect the final object, and trying to recognize and celebrate that, whether it's the mold makers that originally made the patterns and the molds that cast those radiators or cast those bathtubs or whatever your source of material is coming from. Because they're just such beautiful objects.
I know. I
luscious,
know.
the curves that you see in a cast iron tub, and it's because it's made for a human, the proportions just like have this instant human quality to them. It becomes figurative and feel because it's supposed to wrap you in this warmth of the hot water.
Yeah. And it'll keep the water warm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I've been trying a lot more to, even though I've always made the effort, I've been really pushing the idea of material and concept being very, very hand in hand.
And the iron lends itself to that, it sounds like.
It does.
Yeah.
But I'm also doing a similar idea of the same series, but I'm using Nerf cast urethane foam.
Oh, okay.
So it's, the stuff of childhood. So it's iron was not appropriate. It was all wrong.
Yeah.
I cast a couple in iron. I cast a couple in aluminum. It was just like, no, this is wrong. It needs to be this squishy backyard cul-de-sac kind of thing. So,
I know that. Yeah. But that's always something that you've been very transparent about, is that, well, you said it earlier better than I could say it now, but the concept, the material follows the concept.
Yeah.
And so with that, I think you're staying true to yourself. Yeah.
Yeah. The context of it it can be really powerful if it is done right. I don't know that I do it right and if it's powerful or not, but it's, I feel like when I see works of art at a show or a museum, a gallery, and there is that marriage of content and context.
Yeah.
It takes it to a whole nother level.
Yeah. And I think that for anybody listening or watching this, just seeing my reaction of what I found out about those plaques and the bathtubs, I think you're accomplishing it and you're being humble, but I respect that quality about you. So,
and they're not just bathtubs, but there's some that are radiators.
I remember I'm pulling images from my.
And the funny thing is to me, they're funny. They're just, it's like almost a joke in a way. It's like a lot of times when I'm in the studio, I'll do things until it kind of makes me giggle or I think it's a little bit silly, but still serious. And
it's just the right amount.
Yeah.
So I've got, so we've covered like the breadth of everything that I had wanted to. And so is there anything that you want to, I've got some optional questions. Or is there anything that you would want to fill in? I don't know.
Sorry, my dog is about to pull the computer away from me.
Oh, I mean, we've been going for about an hour, so we can, if this is a good time to stop, we can. Is he hungry? Is it dinner time?
He's had his dinner.
Oh,
we're untangled. So.
Okay.
Yeah. Or now he's backing up. Now we're getting tangled again. Right. We're good.
I think a lot of these you've already answered.
Actually. There's some we haven't talked about.
Huh? Say that again.
There's some we haven't talked about.
I mean, there's specific questions. I mean, because it's like we've been going for an hour, like recording seriously. And so, but we still have this like 15 to 20 minutes in the after show.
Okay.
I want to make sure that we're not overly fatigued. But actually, do you have your cheat sheet right there?
I do.
Do you want to peruse the after show questions.
Yes, I do wear glasses when I read. So,
Oh, that's that.
um,
I wear glasses when I do anything with power tools.
that's smart. I hope
Yeah.
they're safety glasses.
So there's no shame in wearing glasses.
No. Um,
And it's just if there's one that you're like, oh, that's the one I want to talk about, then that's what we want to talk about in the after show.
well, one thing that we didn't talk about that is in your list of questions is
Oh, above? Okay, yeah.
uh, like any kind of advice or
Yes. Oh
things
my
like
gosh,
that.
that's like the most important reason why I'm actually doing this. Oh, and also Hot on the Horizon. I want to do that too.
Yeah. So, which one you want to do first?
I want to do. Did I skip it?
I don't know.
I'm looking at my cheat sheet now. Advice. Yeah, it's like the last one. It's the last one. It's the most important question. And I was like, yeah, we can be done now. Like, no,
Yeah.
Laura. Yeah.
I have made a furnace. I've only made one furnace.
Okay. Do you want to talk about that? Because I'd love to hear about it. It's
like
like
I
my
said,
favorite thing.
Okay. So, like I said, Jerry Massey and I would design on the fly with what we had at hand. We were kind of bequeathed a furnace that had a lot of issues, and so we did a lot of modifications, and it got to the point where we just got tired of modifying, and being in England with Jerry and with Rick Patton, I realized that iron can be fun. Iron pours can be fun, and they can be successful every time, especially if you have a good furnace that makes great metal.
Yeah.
And we got back from England one year, I think in 2008, and I said, I'm tired of breaking iron. I'm tired of having marathon pours that last 8 or 10 hours because we're only tapping 60 pounds of metal every time. And
yeah.
So I built an 18-inch cupola that we named Fifi. So F-E-F-E. So
I get it now.
yeah.
Oh dear. I'm sorry about that.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, that's cute. Fifi, can you give me a date? Like around about what year? Just curious.
2008.
Okay.
Yeah. So I started building her in 2008 when we got back from England, and did our first pour with her that fall, Halloween of 2008.
Yeah.
And I think it was, I can't remember. We had a visiting artist. I think it was George Beasley, maybe. And I was kind of terrified to run her. I'd never run her, and all of a sudden we didn't have a test run.
Yeah.
And so he told me, fill the stack halfway, see how she's running. When you're confident, start charging more and go from there. And she ran like a champ. And we had a really great crew at UK at the time. Killer crew.
Yeah.
And so that fall, they decided they wanted to make a 10-inch for the student cupola contest at SLOS. And,
all right.
So they started building theirs, and I'm still tweaking Fifi. And we poured. So they started in the winter, December, I think. But we ran Fifi every weekend. We started New Year's Eve, and we ran her every weekend from New Year's Eve until the weekend before SLOS, except once.
And SLOS, for those who's listening who don't, it's in the spring.
Yeah.
It's like end of March or April.
Right.
So it's when students are still in school, but it's the end of the spring semester, but not so close to finals that people can't go.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's.
So I would say, actually, I can't say every weekend, except when I think there was No, but seriously, I mean, we poured every single
Yeah.
weekend except once, but I think 3 of those pours were with Valentine, which was the students' furnace
Yeah.
that had its maiden run on Valentine's Day.
Yeah.
So I learned a lot from that furnace, and it was designed based on all the things I had learned that I hated about every other furnace that I had run. All the things that I didn't like and all the things that I did like, and I wasn't afraid to adjust it. And I think that's really important, that especially people that are coming into it, that don't be afraid to adjust it. It's like, just because you made a slagger at a certain point and you convinced yourself that it was a 100-pound tap, but it ends up being 115, don't be afraid to carve out a half inch and lower
Yep.
that slagger a little bit,
Yeah.
so that you're not botting a stream.
Yeah.
If your ladle holds 100 pounds, keep playing with it until you get 100 pounds and
Yeah.
put your slagger there. And so Fifi's covered with patches. She's got little band-aids of 1/4-inch steel all over to make those adjustments and make it safe, and make it
Yeah.
safe, keep making it safer. Even though I thought she was a safe furnace, I've continued to modify her to get safer and safer and safer, and perform better and better and better. So it's something I always try to tell people that want to build a furnace, or that have a furnace but are having problems with that, is, and that's what Jerry and I were doing when we
Yeah.
were working with furnaces, was that it's okay to change it. To modify it. A lot of people treat their furnaces like a piece of sculpture, and that's great. I mean,
Yeah.
aesthetics are awesome, and we're sculptors. I think of a furnace more like a sledgehammer. It's a tool. And
or kiln. I think when
or
people,
kiln,
when I'm talking to non-iron heads, I'll they'll whatever, it doesn't even really matter, but I'll say it's kind of like a ceramic kiln. Like, it's the thing that gets the material so that we can pour it into the mold and make the art.
It's the tool to get the process done.
Not everybody feel. I want to just put a disclaimer in. Not everybody feels this way.
No.
And I go back and forth. I love appreciating
furnaces.
other people's like aesthetic choices with their friend, because it transcends the tool.
Yeah.
But it's still.
And there are some amazing furnaces that have a very sculptural identity beyond being just a furnace. And I think that's fantastic. For myself, the art comes from the mold. The furnace is the tool. And so I'm not afraid to put patches all over it. I'm not afraid to cut something off and weld something new onto it. Or I don't know how many times I've moved the air coming into the wind box. And I think there's probably 5 patches just for that. And just finding those optimal situations. And so just being able to adjust and being able to let yourself just because you did the math and read the books and did the formulas, you could build 2 furnaces at the same time, identical, with exactly the same math. You think you're cutting everything the same and welding everything the same, and they're going to run completely different. No matter what.
Okay.
It's inevitable. They each have their own personality.
Yeah.
You got to treat the lady right. She gets what she needs, and she gets what she wants,
and everybody's happy.
Exactly.
Oh man. So that's your furnace. Let's see, what else did I have? And what you've learned from your furnaces, you covered that. So hot on the horizon.
Hot on the horizon.
And then we'll do the advice, and we'll close out, and you'll tell them what you're gonna answer for your after show question.
Okay.
So hot on the horizon.
Getting ready. I'm working on patterns right now for fire conference that's starting back up at the Metals Museum.
which I'll be attending too. Rob will be there.
We will be there.
I'm super excited. I kind of want to like, go tell me. I haven't. Who
What's that?
else? Do you know of anybody else?
Oh, I know lots of people.
Yeah, because
Sure.
I want to know, but I also am like, well, I'm not going to put out a call on Facebook like who's going to
Mhm.
fire because it's not my style. And also, I'm like, I can also be surprised. But if you know,
Well, you can ask James Vanderpool. He'll let you know.
I don't want to do. He's so busy. He
He
doesn't
is
need
so busy.
me. Like
Well,
I want to respect him. He. If you are getting ready for fire, I'm getting ready for fire. James is getting ready for fire more than anybody else.
yes, he is. Yeah, I'm actually working on 3D prints,
Mm.
Lost PLA, um,
Oh,
and some people know this. When desktop 3D printers came out,
yeah.
uh, I worked for a long time on figuring out. Um, I'd started 3D printing basically armatures and building um, on top of them with plasticine, and then doing rubber molds, and then
Yeah.
doing waxes. And
Yeah.
I would eventually, I was like, there's got to be a way to skip a step.
Yep.
And so I started exploring things, not knowing that Coral Lambert was doing the same thing. And
Yeah.
one or two other people in the country were also exploring this new, there had always been pattern making since the invention of 3D printers, but that's when 3D printers were only $100,000 or more.
Yes.
But
So
now that
in
you could have,
industry
yeah,
more. Yeah.
so now that we could have something in the studio,
Yeah.
like how can we put this to its best use? And so I came up with Lost PLA about the same time that Coral came up with Lost PLA, about the same time that 3 or 4 other people in the country
Yeah.
came up with Lost PLA.
Uh-huh.
And so my patterns for fire are going to be 3D printed for Lost PLA. And
Can
usually,
you explain to me and other people that might not know Lost PLA?
so PLA is an organic plastic. It's
Okay.
made from either um, corn or
Uh-huh.
tapioca.
Okay.
So if you 3D print with something that's translucent, it's probably made from tapioca, and
Okay.
it smells really good.
Hmm.
Or it smells different. You can tell a very strong difference between
Okay.
that and the corn base, but it's biodegradable,
Mm-hmm.
and it has a melting temperature that is agreeable with ceramic shell.
Okay.
And one of the beautiful things about it is that depending on how geeky you are about, say, ceramic shell and wax,
Uh-huh.
as you heat up the wax, it actually expands. And that's
Mm-hmm.
why you can get a lot of breakage in shells on edges and things like that.
Okay.
Um, PLA collapses. So by
Very
using
beneficial,
right, so by
probably.
using the PLA prints, and then I go back and model wax on top of them to give them my hand as an artist
Mm-hmm.
rather than just my digital mouse hand.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Which is
the
also valid for people that
Sure,
are just doing that.
it
That's
is
yeah.
it's valid, completely valid. It's
But
just
this is just
my
yes,
personal opinion is that
for sure.
I like to
Yeah.
take it that step further. Um, so anyway, they'll you sprue them up very similarly to the same way you would wax. Sticky wax, the little
Mm-hmm.
beads of sticky wax is the key. And so I'm working on a series of, they're actually maquettes for pieces that have been turned down for commissions. I have to get them out of my head. If I can't
Yeah.
get paid to make them, I'm just going to
Yeah.
at least have the maquette and uh, go from there.
Yeah. And also it's kind of like because it maybe was turned down, like you're still proud of it.
Oh,
And
sure.
you spent all the time to apply.
Yeah. And
It's not
some of
any
these,
less.
yeah, some of these I probably spent 100 or more hours on them
I
trying to,
think that's a great outlet and a great use
so
for that work, that
yeah.
legwork that you had already done.
Yeah. So if they're if I already have them in the computer, then
Yeah.
I print them, and we're gonna make them, instead of just being existing on a screen, they're gonna be tangible objects now. So
That's so great. That's a way to get closure
yeah,
on
so,
certain things like
so I'm on a kick right now of
uh-huh.
going through my sketchbook and going through my proposals that didn't get accepted,
Uh-huh.
and finding pieces that I never got the chance to make. And it's something Brad Allen challenged me to do years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And,
That's a great
see how it goes.
challenge.
So that's what's next on
That's hot
the
on the
hot
horizon.
And then I'll be at Sculpture Trails in July, just for the weekends.
Yeah.
I was, and I'll probably take a few molds with me, sand molds.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Mm-hmm. Oh
can't tell you
man.
what I don't know what they'll be yet.
Yeah. That's great.
So that's next.
I'm so excited about, yeah. I'm so excited about fire. I got to get back to trails. The future is bright.
It is,
isn't it? It's so wild.
It seems like the virus is slowing down and letting us interact again.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm happy about it.
Take advantage.
So let's have a little advice giving. So advice for young casters, or really anybody in the community, or people that are so young that they're not going to listen to this until, I don't know, the far future, maybe not even in the iron casting, or it's whoever you feel like you want to speak to right now.
I feel like to experienced casters out there, to young casters out there, to people that don't know they're casters yet, there are so many ways you can find your voice. It could be the material itself, like I said, finding that the poetic side of the material you're using, whether it's hot metals or cold casting, that sort of thing, and how can that metal complement the voice of what you're doing. One of my biggest pet peeves, I have to say, is that people say, oh, it's just iron. If it fails, oh, it's just iron. Well, if you cast that piece in bronze, is it okay that it failed? Does that change things? Because you're working as hard or harder to cast this thing in iron and spending as much money or more. It should not fail. It should work. So I very much encourage people to, whether you're using ceramic shell or you're doing resin bonded sand or you're doing green sand, or whatever amazing new material will come next. Get proficient at the pattern making and get very proficient at the gating. And your success rate is going to be much greater. The one thing about iron casting that's the anomaly, two things is, one, the furnace. What's going to come out of the furnace? Is it hot enough? Is it too hot? Some people don't realize too hot is sometimes not a good thing. Too hot will eat your mold, and you'll end up with a ruined mold because it ate the mold. But by becoming proficient in gating and spruing and risers and pattern making, you have cut your chances for failure way down. And don't be afraid to adjust with that. Just the same, you don't be afraid to adjust with the furnace. If you need to change your approach, change your approach. And there's no right answer. There might be 10 right answers. Probably 2,000 wrong answers. And sometimes you have to experiment. Sometimes but if you can find somebody to mentor you that really knows what they're doing, that is a huge benefit. So going to a conference like Fire at the Metal Museum, you're surrounded by professionals that are great mentors that know forward and backward how to make a successful mold and how to guide you through that.
In trails too, I feel like for someone who, I get people that will ask me where they can learn iron casting, but they're not students. Like they're not looking to move to go to an undergrad or grad program.
Right.
And a lot of times like that just isn't what's available to these people that are asking. And I always say go to a conference, but I always say also, like, if you can spare a week in the summer, go to trails, because as someone that's not in the position to go to school and find a mentor of a professor, that's where you can really get a good foothold, and then you can keep going back.
Yeah, getting into a volunteering situation. Metal Museum has repair days. You can go volunteer, and then you can make a small mold at night and get that experience. So there are many ways out there, but
or I've even seen, I feel like I've seen like a volunteer at repair days will bring something that they want cast in iron, and then they'll pay for the repair, but they will either be around when the mold is made after hours, or like after hours they'll be coached, and it's like a win-win.
Sure.
So yeah, that's another good resource for how to get into it if you're not able to go to school for it right away. Then you'll get the bug, and then you'll be like, I'm changing everything. But yeah, that's great advice.
You don't necessarily have to go to school for it.
No.
There are so many brilliant iron casters out there that, and not even sculptors. You can go and learn from a professional foundry, see if you can watch pours, or there are plenty of opportunities out there that don't require you to be in an academic situation or a museum situation, that you can learn, and there's plenty of videos.
All right, well, thanks for that advice and your whole story, and I think this is a good place to wrap it up. But have you thought about your after show?
I have.
What is your question? Or I think I said one or two, but it's kind of whatever you want.
My favorite iron pour.
Are we in this after show? You want to talk about your favorite iron pour?
No, I thought you were saying I should pick my topic for the after show.
Yes. I was like, wait, but it's not the after show yet. So, but is that?
So my topic for that is, I would like to talk about my favorite pour and what led up to it.
Oh my gosh. Spoilers. Can you tell me just where it was?
I already hinted at it earlier in our conversation. So
overseas?
The trailer was overseas. The impetus was overseas, and then my favorite pour happened at Sloss.
Okay, I can't wait to hear about it.
2009, Sloss 2009.
All right, well, we're gonna end it here for all of you listening, and we're gonna go over to the after show, which will be available. It's going to be available for Patreon listeners. I'm probably going to do a little alone. I'll record a little ending that has all the information, because I don't know exactly what I'm going to say just yet. But yeah, Jim, thanks for being on this the first episode of the podcast Iron. It's been a pleasure.
I feel very honored to be the first one, and it's really cool that I was there for the first iron pour at the University of Georgia, and you were there for the final iron pour at the University of Georgia.
Yeah. You're going to make me cry. Yeah.
Thank you for...
Yeah, I'm really excited to see what this ends up turning into and the trials and twists and turns that this is going to take. But thanks for starting this with me.
Thank you.
And I'm so glad that you're my friend. I have so much love and respect for you as an artist, a maker, and one of
I
my
do.
mentors. So
I cannot even begin to believe your craftsmanship. I'm just in awe.
oh gee, thanks. Oh. All right. Well, folks, that's where we're going to end it right now and go over to the after show. So thanks for watching. And if you're on Patreon, we'll see you over there. All right. Okay.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening to this kick-ass episode with Jim Wade. Also, thank you to Jim for being gracious enough to let me interview you and for your patience as I worked through all the kinks in this podcasting system. If you want to follow Jim on Instagram, his handle is James_Wade_sculpture. And his website is jameswadejr.com. If you like what I'm doing and want to support the podcast, go to our Patreon page, which is Patreon/podcastiron, and choose the contribution level that fits within your budget. Of course, as was already mentioned during the interview, Patreon supporters at any level get access to the after show recording. And this is a 15 to 20 minute extra, little tidbit with the show's guest. And in this episode's after show, Jim shares details from his favorite iron pour. So for as low as $1 a month, you can support the show and get this extra content. And please believe me when I say that even $1 will make a difference when it comes to paying for the hosting and dispersing of these interviews to the public, because at the moment, I'm 100% funding this passion project, but it's expensive. I'm still going to do it no matter what because I think it's worth it, but anything that you're generous enough to contribute will help. And if you don't have it in your budget to support the podcast on Patreon, but you still want to help out, I appreciate that too. And so you can just share this podcast with someone who you think might be interested. So anyone you know in the cast iron art community, if you're a professor, share it with your students. If you're a student, share it with your professor, share it with your dad. Anything and everything helps. And for that, I say thank you so much. If you want to get in touch with me, if you want to be interviewed on the podcast, if you have an idea of someone else you think I should interview on the podcast, then you can email me, and the address is thepodcastiron@gmail.com. Well, that's about it for now. Thanks again for listening. I'm sending you all my love always, and I can't wait to share the next episode with you. Bye.